Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Monday, February 2nd. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris, continuing on through our position preview series. Today, we focus on Shohei Ohtani and the UT-only players, and we get to some very, very late outfielders. So, a lot of players to discuss, and I think we've hit this point. You know, it's February 2nd now. Everyone's excited about Groundhog's Day. I live in a town now with maybe the second most famous groundhog in the world.
There's the second one, because I know Punxsutawney Phil. I don't know any others.
Jimmy the Groundhog is the groundhog in my town. And in 2015, Jimmy the Groundhog became famous because he bit the mayor's ear while the mayor was relaying Jimmy's message about whether or not we'd have 6 more weeks of winter.
What does that mean?
That's not good for anybody.
No.
It means the mayor's going to get a rabies shot, and
It sounds like 12 weeks of winter left.
Yeah, if you're the mayor, you're like, my time is probably over. So yeah, I don't know. Jimmy the Groundhog, making himself famous the old-fashioned way, just getting things done for himself. But apparently, spring's coming early, even though it's been a long, long winter.
Yeah. And we hit a road bump in our Avengers Watchathon. We started Deadpool, and my wife nixed it.
She did not enjoy Deadpool. Okay, I haven't seen Deadpool.
Also just thought the humor was inappropriate for our young children. Well, they're not that young anymore, and I was like, you think they're not making balls jokes when you're not around? Like, but we're gonna let the Deadpool like area just sort of. It doesn't actually. You can watch X-Men and sort of advance the plot without needing to know what happened in Deadpool. But
all right. Well, hey, we're just planning on 6 more weeks of winter in case Jimmy happened to be wrong with his report, because I think the Groundhogs didn't even agree on the weather report, which is on brand for 2026.
They have a conference or something?
They would just attack each other, man. Based on what I know about Jimmy, Jimmy's not having a conference. Jimmy's not hearing second opinions about what he thinks the rest of the year is going to hold. He's decided. Let's get on to our foundational UT. I want to say UT only, but they're not UT only. They're foundational UT bats, because one of them, Shohei Ohtani, also pitches, as you may have heard at some point. It's pretty cool that he does that. In 2025, just his hitting value alone, Shohei Ohtani was third in the Fangraphs Player Rater, behind Aaron Judge and Cal Raleigh. Of course, the pitching value was very limited for Ohtani because he was rehabbing back from a major injury in the big leagues, so the outings were short. He was not eligible for wins. He was starting games, didn't have an opener, like all the things that you need for fantasy. You need volume, you need that shot at a win. Ohtani wasn't doing that. So the value he offered you as a pitcher was close to zero, right? I mean, not exactly zero, but close to zero. But even still, you go back, look what he's done these last 3 years. 2024, he was hitter number 1 by $9. It's a huge margin. In 2023, he was hitter number 7. So you get that in the best lineup in baseball, and you get a guy this year who, even though he says he's not going to pitch for Team Japan in the World Baseball Classic, he's going to pitch a lot more for the Dodgers and work a lot more like a regular starter in 2026. So the consensus, regardless of your format, is that Shohei Ohtani is the first player off the board. I don't think there's really much of a case against that. Even in leagues where you have to change week to week, is he a hitter, is he a pitcher? As we outlined, he's an elite hitter, even with no contributions on the mound. And of course, there are daily leagues where you can toggle him. There are some leagues where you get all the stats regardless of what thing he's doing on a particular day. I mean, some formats make him far and away the number 1 player on the board, but most formats still hold that position for him.
Yeah, I do think there's going to be some portion of his career where he's striking out 30% of the time again, and maybe his batting average drops, but I don't really see an indication of that happening right now. I guess it was a 4-year high in swinging strike rate, and he did actually increase his strikeout rate from 22% in 2024 to 26% last year. But he was more patient. He hit 55 homers. He still had a 282 average, so I'm not calling for doom just yet. There is one question: is like, does he have twice the injury risk of a regular player?
I think he does. Yes.
I mean, there's 2 different ways to get hurt. I used to think of it as Well, there's two different ways for him to help, but what we have seen, like, he could be hurt as a pitcher and still hit, but we have seen that his injuries as a pitcher affect his availability as a hitter as well. So I wonder if there's, like, would that be enough for you to take Judge over him? Probably not. Because Judge has his own injury risk,
No, because even in a weekly league where you can't get all the stats all the time, I think having the ultimate flex player, where if you get to the point in the season where your pitching's light and your hitting's doing great, getting starts from a guy like Ohtani is better than just about anything you're going to find on the waiver wire for pitching, right? Outside of an abnormally great run of a prospect or some kind of surprising drop, maybe someone comes back from an injury. That's a huge, like, multi-position eligible thing to have in your back pocket.
But you're also going to hurt yourself pretty hard on the hitting side if you take out a 50-homer bat, dude.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, let's just say your hitters collectively are overperforming because he's there and it's mostly a healthy group and your pitching is lagging. You at least have the option for a pretty big correction that no other player in the pool currently offers. I think to your point, though, about usage, projections are saying under 700 plate appearances the last two seasons, 727 and 731. That's with World Series runs on the ledger, this year being a WBC year. You could see the Dodgers being just a little more careful, maybe dialing back to the 650 range for plate appearances. Even still, I think he's the number one player off the board for me. I don't have that scenario at this point where I would choose Judge over Shohei Ohtani. There's no other way to describe him. He's just amazing, and I just can't wait to see what he does next. And I look at Schwarber versus Alvarez. Kyle Schwarber and Yordan Alvarez are the other UT-only players that go in the early rounds. They both go in the second, and they kind of go as a toss-up right now. Schwarber was hitter number 5 last year, behind only Judge, Raleigh, Ohtani, and Soto, after being hitter 17 in 2024 and hitter 35 in 2023. Now, I don't ordinarily look at a DH and think he's going to get better as he ages. I kind of look at what we saw from Schwarber last year as a relative high point in terms of what he's capable of. And everyone's like, duh, he hit 56 homers. He's never done that before. I think the regression probably pulls him back into the low 40 range. That's where all the projections are at. Wouldn't be surprising if he was a little under that. We've seen some pretty significant batting average downside built into this profile as well. And the K rate, it's okay, 27.2%. That's the area where if he loses something in any given year, that's where that average goes from the 240 range to the 230 or 220 range pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he had a 197. He had 720 plate appearances in 2023. Kyle Schwarber, that was not that long ago, and he hit 197. So, yeah, I think there's a significant batting average risk here. And if I took him and was penciling him into my live tracker and wanted to, put a realistic batting average in, I might actually take the Zips 223 instead of the Oopsie 239 just to represent, the downside of what I had potentially done to my team in that category. But, as the overall batting average trends downwards, I mean, the league batting average is now under 250. It becomes more palatable, I guess.
You can also plan going in with your first pick to offset some of that Schwarber average risk, and then with your third, fourth, fifth picks also nudge it back up. You can afford it. So if you believe in the power and the run production holding steady, you just have to really do your homework accordingly. I think it's
early.
It's a little bit too risky for me.
It's early to give yourself a problem. You know what I mean? You want to stay away from problems the whole way through. I think I had Ellie De La Cruz in this last draft that I took, and his batting average is not as risky, I don't think, but it wasn't a plus. And I may have overcorrected because by the end I had a better than average batting average, but came up a couple homers short of the 300 I wanted to get projected. So, it does weird things to you where you start. You think you need 3 players to fix one player's batting average, and sometimes you can overreact. I know this is soft stuff, and you can just say, "Well, no, I won't do that. I'll just get another player, and it'll all work out." But it does mean that you have to kind of pick from another pool of players. Like you've created a need already, where you have to get a Quan, or you have to get somebody like that.
If you're in a points league or a league that rewards OBP, then I do think Schwarber at his price is actually appropriate. I think he is clearly 100%. A top 15, top 20 hitter where he's producing every single year because he walks a ton. Where he falls in that OBP category is absolutely fine. It doesn't hurt you. It even helps you more often than not. Even in down years, the OBPs are still fine. He had a 343 OBP the year that he hit 197. So format is key when it comes to Kyle Schwarber. But if I'm in a 5x5 roto that uses average, and I'm looking at Schwarber versus Yordan Alvarez, the risk I'd rather take is the health risk. Because Yordan Alvarez, to me, he's a special hitter, man. Like, I know it's 1,330 plate appearances of the last 3 seasons combined. That is not good for someone that you think of as a foundational piece for your lineup and someone that's mostly a real-life DH, right? It's been fluky injuries. It's been some mismanagement, perhaps, by the Astros medical staff. I think, now that they've turned the corner, I think we can actually get back to a healthier Yordan Alvarez. Now, I'm aiming for something in line with 2024. He was the 14th hitter in the player rater that year. He was 34th in 2023. He was buried in 2025 because he was just so hurt last year. But the thing I keep coming back to is just what happens when this guy has a full season where he feels good. He's never hit less than 277 in the last 4 years, so you get a good or great average to go with 30-plus homers annually. Even chips in a handful of bags, which, it's not nothing. I think if there's one hitter in this league that blends the attributes of Aaron Judge and Juan Soto together simultaneously, it's Yordan Alvarez.
Yeah, I mean, this dude does not really chase. He hits to every part of the field. He doesn't hit too many fly balls, but he doesn't hit too many ground balls. I mean, it's almost perfect across the board. And, it is built on bat speed. So last year, when you look at the reduction in power, I think that was just, he was hurt and it affected his bat speed and it affected his power. And it just, I would just, you count that as a lost year. But when I look at his spray chart, if you're looking at this on YouTube, his spray chart might just be the perfect spray chart. If you want to say one thing about Soto is maybe he goes oppo a little bit too much, because it does rob some power from you. Yordan, does pull his power mostly, but he has this left center power too. Like that's when he's covering on a fastball. He'll hit a fastball out to left center and everything else out to the pull side. But this is the type of spray chart that's really hard to defend. He hits it hard everywhere, really hard. So I love Yordan Alvarez. I think, in terms of pure hitter, quote unquote, yeah, top 3 guy.
The simple toggle you make is, we talk about injury risk. We're talking about health grades for pitchers. Pitcher week kicks off after this episode on Tuesday, February the 3rd. I think you have to be very risk averse with your other early round bats if you take Yordan here, but I do think the risk is going to be worth the reward. He's a player I've drafted a couple of times already in my early drafts, and I'll probably get him in auction scenarios where you can go get anybody you want. If I keep landing the same kinds of picks where I'm in that early part of round 2, like pick 20, pick 21, right in that little spot, I think that's exactly where I want Yordan Alvarez this year because I think he can be a top 5 overall hitter. I think
if you get lucky, you could even pair him with Jazz Chisholm and just go full YOLO.
Well, that might even be more of an auction sort of build too, which, I mean, maybe this is the year where you kind of just pile up players in the back of the top 20 and end up with someone that does pop for some top 5 value. But no major qualms with that top 3 other than Kyle Schwarber's average downside. And I think the price has just gotten a little high for my liking if you're kind of looking at that group.
A small little downside to just taking any of these guys, in particular in draft and hold. The metric, the sort of the math that I've done in my head is that every time you take a multi-eligible guy, you buy yourself an extra pitcher slot because you've covered a couple positions with one guy. And every time you take a util only guy, you've cost yourself a pitcher spot because you've covered 0 positions. So that's just the sort of math I have in my head. I'm trying to, and I don't want to. I think some people overdo it. I've seen some really aggressive picks of multi-eligible guys. I'm not sure they're worth that much. But what I love doing is getting guys that are multi-eligible right when you're starting to cover backups. And you could cover yourself from picking one of these if you just got the right multi-eligible guy at the right time.
There's another wrinkle that comes with this, and you start to see it a bit more with the second tier, the next couple UT-only bats that get drafted in all leagues. Christian Yelich and Iván Herrera, right? They go outside the top 100. Yelich kind of closer to that marker. Herrera probably goes 60 to 75 picks later, depending on the room. Both of those guys might qualify at a position depending on the thresholds in your league. They don't qualify if the threshold is 20. Yelich, I think, played 19 games in the outfield last year. Herrera caught enough, I think, to at least qualify in leagues that require 10 games the previous year. And I think there's a chance where you could look at both of these guys and you could see them playing somewhere defensively in the early part of 2026 to meet the in-season qualifications for a new position. And I was looking back. It's usually lower. It's usually 5 games in season to pick up eligibility on a lot of platforms. Yelich made 5 starts in left field last season by the end of April. So you might not be as locked into that lack of flexibility if you'd go with Yelich in a UT spot. The microdiscectomy that he had prior to last season seemed to really help a lot. He still hits a ton of ground balls. That has just always been the problem for Christian Yelich, air quotes, the problem, the thing that you wish he didn't do, other than that 2019 season when he had a 43.2% ground ball rate. That's an outlier. He's going to be above 50%. That's just part of how he hits. I'm wondering if the power is actually a little underprojected right now in the numbers because of the impact of that back injury from previous years. Like if that drags them down a little bit. He still appears to be in a pretty graceful decline phase, and even if they do play him in the outfield, once a week or so, it's mostly a DH role, so it shouldn't be as physically demanding on him as trying to play left field for 140 games. So just curious where you're at with Yelich. If you're not in on those top 3, things don't break the right way, you don't get the first overall pick with Ohtani, and you're sitting there with a UT spot open round 6, round 7. Do you think Yelich is a good value?
Yeah, I'm looking right now. I did an overall composite instead of a position by position, and I want to see where he lands. For me right now, he lands as around $11 player. Somebody asked what my settings were on the auction calculator to do this, and I just put in the NFC because that's what I'm drafting right now. So it's 5 outfielders, corner infield, middle infield, util. 15 teams. I toggle between using Oopsie mostly for pitchers, the Bat X mostly for hitters. So I in the composite, which is adding all 3 of them together, I get $11, and he's around Steven Kwan, which actually makes a lot of sense for me. Good average. Yelich a little bit more power forward than Kwan. Kwan a little bit more batting average forward, but they seem like comparable players. I could see trying to make the decision there. I've got Lawrence Butler is worth a little bit more than him, and Kyle Stowers is worth a little bit less. I mean, does all this feel right? Where does he get taken in ADP? Where are other people that you're deciding in ADP?
Yeah, I guess the cross-positional comps are pretty important here. I was thinking about how Yelich has an interesting combination of better floor than a bunch of those guys, but almost equal ceiling, which you don't usually get for a player.
Yeah, I mean, he had 29
at that
homers
age.
last year. Yeah.
Did 29 homers last year. If some of the homers go away, maybe you get back to 20 bags. I think he still runs the bases really well. I think there's a lot of things about him, and I think he's so important to the foundation of that lineup. But that's part of the reason why they DH him. A, they've got better defenders, but B, his bat is so important to what they do. They really need to push him as hard as they can. And prior to the back injury that resulted in surgery in 2024, he was over 600 plate appearances in 2023. He was at 671 in 2022. So they will let him go. And I think with Stowers, who we talked about, is as a fringe top 100 overall guy, there's still questions about the swing and miss and whether or not his floor is any higher than what we saw last year, I guess. So I kind of think, as much as I like Butler and as much as I think Stowers is solid, I'm probably taking Yelich over all those guys, and Kwan too. I think that Kwan profile is almost like a Yelich downside, although I think Kwan is much, much safer in average, which says a lot about Kwan's ability in that category than it does about a Yelich deficiency.
That's from the calculator side, though, because Kwan in the drafts is going 171.
Yeah. They're not really an ADP toss-up. It's kind of weird.
116. But I do in the calculator. Robert Jr. is actually right there with Christian Yelich, and I would take Yelich over Robert Jr. any day. It's just if they're both on the board for me, I'm like I can't believe that Yelich goes after Robert because they're. What do you want from Robert? You want power and speed. Well, you can get that from Yelich, and I feel like the floor is so much higher.
Yeah, he's surrounded by Eugenio Suarez, who we now know is going back to Cincinnati, Yandy Diaz, Jordan Westberg, Noelvi Marte, Joe Adell, Kyle Stowers. I mean, I like Yelich more than all of those guys.
It's a weird part of the rankings, though. It just has a lot of players I don't like. I might take Geno Suarez over. I mean, this landing in Cincinnati is about as good as it can be. I think what I end up doing here is taking pitchers. I see Glass now is 123. I've got a share of his at least. I don't know why. I don't have many players in this group right here.
Yeah, it's probably just the shape of your builds where you're doing something a little bit different and weaving around that pocket right there. But I think Yelich is absolutely fine where he's going. Could be a little bit profitable. Doesn't have to be a good pick in that range. Herrera, I think, has a little more going on because he had elbow surgery to clean up loose bodies. There were bone spurs at the end of the season, and that kept him from catching a lot in 2025. He also had a sprained knee in April. Saw that in a John Denton story over at MLB.com. It just sounds like the way they view him as a player, catching at least sometimes, health permitting, is still on the table. And defensively, now that the elbow's fixed, he's going to play somewhere. So it's just like maybe it takes longer because he's working in at two different spots. Maybe he's mixing and matching between catcher, first base, and DH, and it's a little bit of a slow play behind the plate and once in a while at first. And maybe it takes until late May before Herrera qualifies somewhere in season. So that's sort of my built-in expectation. If he qualifies as a catcher, we talked about him briefly on the catcher preview, he's underpriced if he's going where he's going in NFBC drafts. But I think he'll go earlier in leagues where he actually qualifies back there because he hits the ball hard. He doesn't strike out a lot, sub 20% K rate, career walk rate near 10%. I mean, he could be right in the heart of the order for the Cardinals going through this rebuild.
He really could be. And I guess it just makes it hard to plan in draft and hold season. I would expect his ADP to go up because, this could be an ideal pick in a league where, especially like a one catcher league, I don't care if he gets catcher. Maybe I take a catcher real late and I take Iván Herrera, and even if he doesn't get catcher, there'll be some catcher on the wire, right? I think in draft and hold season when you're like, man, I really need to have two good catchers and I don't know if I can count them as one. It's like it's uncertainty at a time when people are drafting like gladiator leagues. A gladiator league, you can't change anything. Like where do you pick him in a gladiator league? You know what I mean? So I still think he's a great hitter. You're right. I think there's some really awesome traits here with great chase rate, great whiff rate, great hard hit rate. He seems like a hitter. So maybe it's just, take him and hope he gets what you need. That's the cherry on top. I will say that first base has been a very difficult for business for me this year. I'd almost rather in some cases that he gets that first base eligibility because I have too many teams where first base has become a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love it from a long-term perspective if he qualified there enough to make that a position every year. If they like their other young catchers more defensively or something and they want to take wear and tear off of Herrera's body, okay, fine. I think he actually hits enough to give them the choice on that. So very curious to see how it plays out, but definitely someone that I like even as a UT at his current price. There's a big break before you get to the next cluster, and it kind of runs from Marcell Ozuna, who's still a free agent, to Moises Ballesteros, who's kind of a backup catcher for the Cubs, Bryce Eldridge, Luis Campusano, Jock Peterson, David Fry, and Masataka Yoshida. This is pretty much a deep league group of players across the board right now, at least as far as 2026 goes. And I guess I'll kind of make it an open-ended question for you. Who, if anyone, do you like out of that group right now for redraft mixed leagues?
Dude, I am out.
Easily out on all of them, right?
Just out. Dude, Ozuna, I don't even know if he's going to get a job. I mean, at this point, that if he has offers in front of him from teams, they're all the same offer. It's like, there's not going to be a big difference. Every analytics team is going to put together a package, and it's going to be 1-6 if they're giving him offers. So if they're giving him offers and there's like a 1-6, 1-8, whatever it is, it's something small. Why hasn't he picked yet? So to me, I'm worried there are no offers.
I think he could be a fallback to teams that were looking at Suarez if they don't need anything defensively. But we've seen inconsistency. He's 35 years old now. He's got a domestic violence suspension on his resume. Teams might just be out.
That's what I'm worried about. I mean, that's ballast on top of it. Like,
yeah, teams just decide they don't want to deal with a situation like that.
Like, we haven't heard any buzz about Julio Urias, right? Like,
none.
At some point, teams are like, nope, that's too much of a headache. I don't want to be involved. And like, I know it sounds awful, but like there's the risk versus reward for some people, right? Like, if Ozuna was better, he might have a better shot at coming back, right? But he's 35 years old, so they're just like, maybe he's not getting any offers. It would be interesting. You're right. The Suarez thing, like, what if the Pirates feel like they just need to add another bat? Will I be interested then? I don't think so, because not only his personal stuff, but just the on the field stuff for Ozuna has been pretty erratic. I mean, I think there's just a chance that he's also just done, even if he gets a deal, right? And he gets out there, and I know he looked pretty good last year, but in terms of hard hit rate, it was his worst of the last 4 years. Barrel rate worst of the last 4 years. Max EV worst of the last 4 years. ISO was like one of the worst of his career. He hit 21 homers and hit 232. And if he's going to go to like somewhere like Pittsburgh, is it going to get better? So I think there's a chance that he's done helping you in fantasy. And remember, he's a projected bounce back where he had a 114 ISO, 114 WRC plus last year, and all the projections except for the bad X are for better than that. And what we know from Jeff Zimmerman is that projected bounce backs for people over 32 are less reliable. So at 35, I wouldn't necessarily just trust the projections. I think the hardest one for me to be out on probably is Moises Ballesteros, because I do like some aspects of what he's doing at the plate. It's a nice small whiff rate. It's a good walk and strikeout rate, controls his zone really well. Didn't hit the ball that super hard, 33% in his small sample last year, but in AAA had a 42% there. I think there's 15 to 20 homer power in here at least, but with a good batting average, I could be talked into it. I guess the thing that I'm just worried about is the Cubs are a really competitive team. Moises Ballesteros has options left. And, I think there could, I don't know if it's a signing or just a decision to say, hey, let's try Austin and Shaw at DH. And it's, Shaw's also util and going to be moving around and stuff. But like, let's keep the veterans in the big leagues. Let's keep McCormick and Kevin Alcantara, and that cost Ballesteros his job. Let's keep more defensive versatility and not clog up DH with a young guy who we can send to the minors and say, hey, catch some more for us, right? So I'm worried that there's some percentage chance he's not in the big leagues.
Yeah, it could be a little bit of an up and down thing just because of the way that roster is built. I mean, I think in terms of things you like about him as a hitter, it does remind me of a left-handed Alejandro Kirk in some ways. I think the key difference is Kirk has become a great defender behind the plate. Ballesteros just has to get there. There's still a lot of work to be done on that side. If the Cubs think he can do that long term, maybe they will send him down for those purposes and bring him back up later in the year when someone gets hurt. Right? They just mix him back in as a bat when they lose somebody. Right? There's a lot of ways they can handle it with the way they have put their depth together. Eldridge is in a tougher spot now with Luis Arias joining the position player group in San Francisco, so I think his redraft appeal took a hit for me. Campusano is still in San Diego. They've needed a catcher for a long time, and he hasn't been able to become that guy. So my belief in him has finally faded. So if you want to just fade me, like maybe this will finally be the year. Peterson.
He is listed as the backup catcher on Fangraphs, and the other options are Blake Hunt and somebody Duran.
So $1 in an NL only
Rodolfo.
League, maybe. Yeah, I don't see it.
I didn't know that first name.
Peterson, if you had no UTs and like a draft and hold and you're just getting them really late, like maybe he could go back to mashing on the big side of a platoon. That wouldn't be the strangest thing in the world.
I'm somewhat interested in, and this is the tiniest use case, fourth catcher in a draft and hold.
Oh, you think David Fry will qualify in season?
No, Campusano and Fry, like both of them. Campusano and Fry is like, I'm going to take you as a util and just hope you add catcher.
Yeah, I think I would do that with Fry. I don't know if I would do it with Campusano. I've been disappointed enough times.
You think he's so bad at the defensive portion of it?
I don't know why they don't like him a little bit more than they do, given their circumstances.
I will say
they do it the way they do it.
You know that there's always the chance that a new manager thinks of him differently.
Possible. That is possible. The Yoshida tagline for me just looks like an extra guy in Boston right now, so it's hard to rely on him right now. I think if you were to end up getting traded in a deal where the Red Sox eat some money, then that would change my assessment right now. I just don't know if he's going to play enough to make much of an impact for us.
The Red Sox, though, are a little bit fascinating. I just ended up taking Tristan Casas, in a league where I had Steer and was feeling nervous about first base. And I'm happy I took Casas like 100 points after ADP, so I didn't reach for him or anything. But I took him because something's going to happen in Boston, I feel like. Like the media coverage is not good right now. I mean, they are being roasted in Boston for, the Devers trade is coming back up again because this offense is behind. And right now, to go into the season with Marcelo Meyer, Nick Sogard, and Romy Gonzalez as the solutions at second and third, it just doesn't feel very Boston-like. At the same time, they traded away Jordan Hicks and paid his salary down. So they salary dumped a guy they got in a salary dump, and they had to pay a prospect in order to get out of some of the money and get under the second luxury tax thing. So they may not have any money to solve this, in which case I think Tristan Casas and Masataka Yoshida might matter because, one of them might get traded and the other one is the DH, and or they get traded together because Casas, absolves them of their Yoshida money and gets them a second or third baseman. We were trying to come up with this in a group chat. Do you remember any of the names? I think the closest we got was Royce Lewis.
Yeah, we were looking at Tristan Casas, like trade partners, like similarly, I guess you'd be looking for inexperienced but injured, exciting players that could just be a good change of scenery candidate. And I thought, Casas for Royce Lewis, you're not getting hung up on, but you're probably still adding something on Boston's side. The way they've talked about him publicly has not exactly helped boost his trade value, right? I mean, like, I realize people can see through the depth chart and make their own conclusions, but they just, I don't know. I think the value is lower than I thought it would be at this point for Tristan Casas.
I thought of somebody that we didn't think of.
Okay.
And there were recent rumors that this player would be traded. So here it is. Yeah, I gave you a second to think about who it is. CJ Abrams. Come on down.
CJ Abrams.
New second baseman for the Boston Red Sox. They could.
Okay.
I think the Nationals would take Casas.
Casas and a pitcher for Abrams?
Yeah. I think let's make a deal.
All right. I'm intrigued by that. I'm always trying to mess with the Red Sox roster, even though I don't have like a stake in it. Like, I'm not a Red Sox fan or anything. I'm perplexed. I want to know. It
seems like they were like assuming they'd get Bregman back, and then it didn't work. And
I'd like to know what their assumptions were.
But also, assuming that they get assuming they get Bregman back also doesn't make sense. Is why did they try to get under the second luxury tax if they had money allotted for Bregman and it just didn't work out? Like, are they now rebuilding?
I don't think that's what's happening either. It'll be a fun team preview to get to though in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have to bring on Jen McCaffrey to help us understand what's going on in Boston right now and throughout this entire winter. The Craig Breslow era continues to be a mystery wrapped in a riddle. We're going back to the outfield for a bit. Where we left off was, I think, outside the top 300 overall, which is kind of where this wide open group of UT guys we just talked about begins. Nick Castellanos is on this group. We got Castellanos, Cam Smith, Victor Scott, Jesús Sánchez, Zach McKinstry, Dominic Canzone, and Jordan Walker. I did see a report that Nick Castellanos is willing to play first base. He's still awaiting a trade out of Philadelphia or just a release, so I don't know if anyone's going to take him up on this. Projections all point to a below-average regular.
Talking about that, like you're still. I just assumed he'd already been released or something. Like,
he's still there.
Just,
I assumed before the start of spring training. That's coming up pretty quick here.
I mean, like if he it's all there's so many assumptions that he's going to leave that like when he's talking about playing first base if needed, nobody is going up to Bryce Harper and being like, why is Castellanos talking about playing first base?
Yeah, because it's all just completely understood. It's not in Philadelphia. Do you think?
I mean, I don't think anybody's signing up for this because I mean, right now he's got a sub 100 WRC projection, and I don't think that's crazy because last year he was a 90 WRC plus and the year before that was 104. He's 33. There's decline all over the place in barrel rates, hard hit rates. Everything's in decline. Strikeout rates, whiff rates. They're actually probably the part of his game that are most steady. But if you have a below 100 WRC plus guy, you're not putting that guy at first. You don't want that guy at DH. The average first baseman has a 108 WRC plus. The average first baseman is 8% better than league average with the stick. Of course he is. So I think they may just keep him on the roster. Is that a crazy idea? And just because there's no better option and he's just their not happy righty bench bat? No.
I mean, is he going to be that? He
Marsh
to play
platoon?
every day, right?
Marsh platoon?
No, I don't think. I think they're over it in Philly. I think they are. I'm not drafting him either way until the situation is resolved. Like if you said he's going to be in the first base DH mix for, again, the Pirates or a team that was in on Suarez, then maybe there's something there. But yeah, the overall long-term outlook is still pretty bleak. It's like bounce back to what, 245, 250, and maybe 20 homers. Is that the best case scenario at this point?
Yeah, I mean he's going. What is this, like sixth outfielder in draft and hold right now?
Yeah.
So
250, 294, 400 last year, 17 homers and 70, like runs and RBIs being in a good lineup. Put him in a lesser lineup, that probably falls a little bit. So
I guess you could say like Padres first baseman.
Beyond Nick Castellanos, though, there are some outfielders we'd like that are part of this tier. Cam Smith is really interesting. Just flew through the minor leagues, barely spent time there with the Cubs, was part of the big trade for Kyle Tucker. 32 games in the minor leagues, to be exact. The Astros are saying he may need to earn that spot. Their outfield is a complete mess right now. And the key here is getting long-term development right, because I think Cam Smith will be an important piece for the Astros. I thought he held his own last year. I don't think you can look at a rookie with that little experience in the minors and be disappointed by near league average production while even dabbling a little bit, I think, some pregame situations in center field. Like they were trying all sorts of stuff with Cam Smith last year. We heard good things from Chandler Rome, too, just about how he fit in right away as a rookie. Everything seemed very positive overall. I'm just curious, though, when you look at the underlying numbers, like swing decisions and raw power potential, like what do you think year two holds for Cam Smith, given some of the comments they've made and given the state of that depth chart?
I mean, I think this is an athlete who makes good decisions. So it's not even somebody where you're like, oh, will he ever understand the strike zone? No, he understood the strike zone pretty well, you know. And I think he held his own, you know, given that he had so little time in the minor leagues. I think you had a note here that he had 77 plate appearances above single A. And, you know, I don't know why his GM is saying stuff about turning the corner. I mean, a 90 WRC plus from a 22-year-old in his first try at the big leagues with a good chase rate, good max EV, and then these underlying traits that really I like here. If you look at this table here, top 15% in both bat speed and sprint speed. You know, you do have O'Neal Cruz, but he makes better decisions, I think, than O'Neal Cruz. He makes more contact than O'Neal Cruz. Jordan Walker has a swing shape problem. I don't think Cam Smith has that. And then it's the stars of the game: Julio Rodriguez, Jarren Duran, Corbin Carroll, Ellie De La Cruz, Bobby Witt Jr. You know, it's not. There's not there are mistakes on this, or the mistakes you can make on this list with Jason Dominguez, Luis Robert Jr., O'Neal Cruz, Byron Buxton on here. They have their own little flaws here and there, but these are the athletes in the game, and I'm going to bet on a lot of these athletes in the game, especially since Cam Smith is going as like a sixth outfielder. So what I love about him is I can take 5 outfielders that I think are, are starters, a lot of right-handers. I can do all of my risk-averse situations, and then this is a great time to take a shot. We'll talk about Jordan Walker, and I have some similar feelings in the same spot, but I love taking a shot at a young outfielder with upside as my 6th outfielder, because I'm not necessarily relying on them. It's not day one of the season. I don't have to put them in my lineup, but they could easily play their way into it.
That's where we're at price-wise, right? It's not necessarily someone that has to start right away, or if you wait a little bit on outfield, you're probably going to take a couple of players close together and find a longer-term guy that you think is the best of the bunch, a short-term guy that you know is going to play, and then maybe someone else kind of in between for depth purposes. So
yeah, I do that too. Yeah, it's kind of, I talk about the YOLO yo-yo, where it's like, take chances and then take a boring guy. So pair Cam Smith with some oatmeal if you need to, but it's really nice to take a shot at an athlete that could be coming to his own.
I bet we have oatmeal still on this rundown if I had to guess and predict what is to come in the next couple of clusters here. But Victor Scott also goes in this range, and I know he plays very good defense in center field. That'll carry playing time. It's been a bumpy ride for him so far as a big leaguer. Almost 200 games, but 618 plate appearances, basically a season. 206, 283, 293. So it's a 67 WRC plus, 39 stolen bases. Mentioned the defense, 7 homers, so non-zero pop, but definitely less than what you need from an outfield spot, even a depth outfield spot. What is it about Scott that gives you confidence, though, that you can keep drafting him late, maybe get someone that inches up closer to being a league average bat over time?
I don't know if this is one of those times when it's a young player that I like better in redrafts than keepers. Because
interesting.
There's a confluence here of team situation and player situation that I think he's fairly safe for playing time this year. Because if you think about what the Cardinals want to do right now, they want to see who's with us. Who's with us going into the future. Nolan Gorman, are you a starter for us? Are you an everyday guy at second or third? Burleson, are you our everyday first baseman? So I think that they're going to go through all of their players and give them really long leashes, at least to begin the season. So I would say Victor Scott has the first 3 months of the season to prove that he could be, even if he's like an 85, 90 WRC plus guy, he could be a guy that at least sticks around for a couple more years. I'm not sure he is that guy long term. It's just that I think the glove gives him the chance to spend this year starting, and even if he hits 5 homers, I have him for the 35 steals. And my idea for how to use him is draft and holds, and maybe even just regular benches. He's the guy you stick in and you try to just add a couple steals to that roster spot. Like, let's say you took Jesus Sanchez, who's coming up, and Jesus Sanchez is going to sit against lefties. If you have it in a daily league and you can just plug in Victor Scott, you could make Jesus Sanchez into a 2020 guy, even if Jesus Sanchez himself doesn't get there. You know what I mean? You can push a couple more stolen bases on there. That's my idea for Victor Scott, is just, can I get a couple more stolen bases on my roster by using them at the right time? You can stream for stolen bases to some extent because stolen bases are stolen on the pitcher. So you can just know which pitchers are really bad at preventing the stolen base and get Scott in there. So it's a very specific use case. It's not a guy that I'm going to put on my list of like breakout young bats. It's not a guy that I think is necessarily destined for being a star in this league. But I think he has a lot of short-term use.
I had to ask because I feel like there's a lot of teams you're drafting and you're going through what you did afterwards. You're like, Victor Scott's my 6th outfielder, my 7th outfielder. I'm like, seems like you're piling up a lot of Victor Scott on those
I have
teams,
a lot of Scott and Cam Smith. Those are like my average 6th, 7th outfielder are Cam Smith and Victor Scott. I mean, it's, I think that there's some risk that I messed up, but I think that Victor Scott is it's weird kind of oatmeal, but it's kind of like, I think he's going to play, and he's my guy who's going to play and get me some stolen bases. And Cam Smith is my, like, this guy could be a star as soon as this year.
Let us know in the Discord what weird oatmeal is in terms of actual food. Like, how do you make oatmeal weird without making it gross? Because I'm just not sure what that would be. I don't know if that's
he doesn't fit the
oats.
normal profile of an oatmeal guy, but like I think he kind of is.
Okay. Jesús Sánchez last year gets traded to Houston. Looked like his typical self with the Marlins before that deal, and it just made me wonder. The strikeouts ticked up, the BABIP slipped. Was it just a function of not being as familiar with the AL pitchers? Like a midseason league change can be a big deal. New home environment, all those things matter. I look at that depth chart and think they have to give him a pretty long shot to be at least a big side platoon guy for them, because their outfield is a mess. And maybe he's a passable, just below 2 WAR sort of corner outfield guy, someone that they just need in the bottom half of the lineup. Is that a reasonable expectation for a guy that we've liked in the past because of his ability to at least hit the ball really, really hard?
Hey, it's not just that. I looked at the underlying things, and they're all still there. The things that we like about him are still there. He was 69th percentile in Seager, which means that, that's a measure of his plate discipline. I always thought he was a little bit aggressive, but it turns out he's the good kind. He's 76th in damage per batted ball events. That's a Robert Orr special, but it's like a barrels type thing. He's 93rd and 90th percentile EV, so the top end power, the raw power, is still there. I do think every year he doesn't access that, you take a little shine off, being like, okay, there's something here that's not working. And I think that if you take a look at the spray chart, you can see it pretty quickly. He doesn't pull the ball in the air. He's really bad. He's 39th percentile in pulling the ball in the air. And it's really unfortunate because he's in the park where pulling the ball in the air gets rewarded the best. So you'd be like, dude, just take a look over there. See the Crawford boxes? Come on. Hit some in there. At this point, it's a strange kind of oatmeal again, where it has upside, and the downside to suggest that maybe he's just never going to get everything out of the underlying numbers. But in the end, I think they need him. It's a little bit like Victor Scott. The team needs him. He's 28. There's still a chance that he has a career season, and that would look like the career seasons from him would look like, 275, 25, 25.
He's been really efficient as a base stealer, and yeah, the underlying numbers have supported that power. So I think if you look real closely, you could actually see like a very post-hype sleeper, a post-hype sleeper with Jesús Sánchez. Zach McKinstry eligible a bunch of other spots. We didn't talk about him on the previews, though. I couldn't find really anything that changed that much. I think he's a nice, versatile, real-life player. I think the use case is draft and hold season, mono leagues, where it's really nice to have one guy that can cover a few different spots for you. He popped those as a super sub last year. 511 plate appearances, slugged 438, got to a 114 WRC+, but he's turning 31 in April. So to me, this seems kind of just like a career peak that happened at 30, and there's almost nowhere to go but down in terms of either playing time, skills, and possibly both.
Yeah, I mean, they're not a team that needs him to necessarily cover all the places, because they've got Trey Sweeney, who has an option, but he could be a utility guy. So if McKinstry falls back, Sweeney can fill that. I think Javier Baez could be their utility guy if they go with Kevin McGonigal at some point. So there's a lot on this roster that's exciting about the Tigers, and there's a lot of redundancy they built in. It looks very much like a Scott Harris team. There's shades of Farhan in here in terms of we have like 3 guys that can play every position. We have redundancy. We have some upside. We have some downside. We have some oatmeal at every position. But that just means that if you're the guy that was at the top of his game last year and was kind of a utility guy, what happens when you slip? Do they just decide, hey, we'd rather call up McGonigal, make him the shortstop, Baez util? There's so many ways that you can cover what McKinstry does on the Tigers next year, I believe. And that makes me nervous.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Nice player, but just hard to rely on that playing time coming all the way back for the reasons that you mentioned. We talked a little bit about the Mariners' right field and DH situation because of Victor Robles being a part of Outfielders Part 3. Canzone is in this mix too. Dominic Canzone is interesting. Really good numbers last season. I mean, 22% K rate with a 14.5% barrel rate. Played a lot more in right field than expected because of Robles' long-term injury. So you look at a situation where you have Luke Raley there, Dominic Canzone, and Victor Robles. If the depth chart is intact on opening day and looks the same as it does now, are you going to be happy if you took Dominic Canzone in this pocket where there's other guys that have clearer past the playing time?
Yeah, I guess, there was some discussion in the Discord that we didn't highlight the downside for Victor Robles enough. And that downside being that Canzone out-hits him. And Raley out-hits him. And then Robles is a short side platoon defensive replacement, which is that's a real risk.
Man, it could be optimal usage. They're not paying him more than like $5 million a year, so they can play it that way if they want to.
I guess the only thing I would say is that Canzone was bad with the glove last year, and it fit my eye test, and I'm just worried that he's really bad. In which case he's the DH, and then Luke Raley still could, I think, be a little bit better with the glove than Canzone, and maybe be better than the bat against righties. So there's room. It's 3 guys for 2 spots. Really? That's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine.
It's okay. I'm not drafting him right now, though. I think it's just too crowded. Yeah, I think he's an interesting hitter, but the glove scares me and the crowding scares me too. You can't expect a lot on a team where Cal Raleigh's going to DH a lot. That's part of the problem.
Right. It's not 3 guys for 2 spots. It's 3 guys for 1.5 spots.
Yep. That's the way I see it, at least right now. Willie Castro goes in this range. I think he's a slightly younger version of Zach McKinstry, and he's playing in Colorado. So I think if you're kind of looking at those two and saying, who do you like better? I think it's Castro just because the PT volume up arrow is where it needs to be for me.
Yeah, what do the Rockies want to do with him? They have him maybe, yes, I was looking at some of Kyle Karos's underlying statistics and Ryan Ritter's, and I'm not sure that they have a third baseman. So I guess Castro could just be their starting third baseman. If Karros has a great spring or they like Karros better, then there's still going to be some platoon aspects with Julian at second, I guess, or first. Yeah, I think this defense is unsettled enough that I don't look at this like I look at the Tigers and be like, oh, they have options. I think that Castro is like the best option at 2 or 3 positions on the infield.
I think the downside with Castro is it's a small 2-year deal. They could trade him at the trade deadline to a contender that just wants to make their bench better, and then he's playing a couple times a week and coming off the bench again, right? So that's sort of your no moves, draft and hold shortcoming potentially with Willie Castro. One other really interesting name that goes in this tier, Jordan Walker. You have Lars Nootbaar recovering from surgery on both heels. His status for opening day is up in the air. Nolan Arenado's been traded away, so the depth chart keeps getting thinner and thinner. I don't think Walker's moving back to the infield. He came up as a third baseman and moved because of Arenado a few years ago. But this is a guy that won't even turn 24 until May. And he was working to rebuild his swing at Driveline early in the offseason. So I think the angle here is just believing that he's making the adjustments that will get everything else to fall into place for him. Because he hits the ball hard and he makes good decisions. He just has mechanics that don't seem to work well against big league pitching.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a little bit with Jesus Sanchez, but Jordan Walker, 93rd percentile seeker. So, yes, it looks like his chase rate is pretty big, but he swings at strikes, and he actually has a really good sense of the zone. 99th percentile, 90th EV. That's just like a max EV. It's a little bit better maybe because there's potential misreads at the very top of the EV landscape. 9th percentile pulled fly ball rate for Jordan Walker. So the problem is pretty obvious there. And I'm going to buy in because he hasn't ever gotten 500 plate appearances at the big league level. In fact, the last time he even got close to that was his rookie season, his best year. So I think on some level, this is the guy that the Cardinals most just need to stick in there for a year. If he completely, falls on his face, that's fine. I don't even know how much trade value he has right now until he does that, right? Like, I don't think he could hurt his trade value by having a bad year at this point. If anybody's buying him, it's because of these numbers. And if they'll still look at those numbers at the end of the season if they're doing a buy low. So I think there's no reason the Cardinals shouldn't just stick Jordan Walker out there for a full season, even if it doesn't look great at the beginning. Just keep running him out there, keep telling him you believe in him, and see what a full season can bring.
Yeah, I think if I'm looking at this entire group, Smith and Walker still just kind of stand out as the younger players that bring a lot of interesting skills to the table. If I'm choosing one, I actually like Smith a little bit more because we haven't seen as much struggle in the big leagues.
Yeah, he has less to do. I mean,
didn't need the mechanical overhaul. Like that's a big deal, and I hope it works for Walker. It'd be great to see it. It's weird that I like the Astros so much from this tier. I like Smith and Sanchez the most, but I do think Walker's a good flyer out of this bunch. Otherwise, it's a tier that I'm sidestepping a little bit because there's very little that separates most of those guys from the open waters, the guys that go like after pick 350 or so. We obviously can't talk about all of them because I think there's probably, 60 or 70 outfielders on the rundown, and this podcast can't be 9 hours long. It's just not the way life's working right now.
There's some on that list that project better than the guys we talked about and are might just be better. I mean, Jeff McNeil is not somebody that I really wanted to highlight too much, except that with the second base eligibility and just his straight up projections going to Sacramento, he projects better than most of the guys that we just talked about.
I think he's a viable bench guy in 15-team leagues where you have cuts. I actually think he fits. He's actually good enough to be on those teams.
OF, and also when I was talking about like plugging Scott in for stolen bases, McNeil is he's a floor fixer. He brings up your floor. It's not going to be necessarily a ton of stolen bases or homers, but he won't hit for a bad batting average, and Scott will. So if you just want to pad all your stats by having a guy who's there to replace them on the days, like Jeff McNeil is a great guy to have on the bench if you have, a lefty platoon guy that was your fourth outfielder.
Yeah, that's a good way to break him down. Owen Casey gets an opportunity with the Marlins. You see a lot of similarities to Kyle Stowers, who had a big step forward getting that run of playing time with the Marlins a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Owen Casey's bat tracking stats, he has a 75-mile-an-hour bat speed and a 35-degree tilt, and he gets the ball out in front a little bit. And Stowers, if you look at he has a 70, what is it here? He's got a 75-mile-an-hour bat speed with a 34-degree tilt, and he gets the ball out in front a little bit. I mean, these guys are really similar also in the fact that they strike out a little bit, but they're hoping to hit the ball so hard that they run slightly higher BABIPs, and I think in Casey's place there might be a little bit more speed there. It's 43rd percentile for Stowers and 64th for Casey. So, Owen, I think, will maybe run even higher BABIPs. And so, that's going to be important because they both strike out a lot. And, that will be a downward pressure on their batting average. But 247 from Oopsie, that factors in bat speed with 13 homers. And I think that they're all light on playing time because you just traded Edward Cabrera for this guy. I don't know why. I think the Marlins would just, put him in, right? just play him. He's ready to go.
Sharing a role in a platoon sense, it's not always the same. Like, you might be marked as a platoon guy, but maybe you sit against the toughest lefties, but you play against half of them. That's still probably enough for Casey to be a little underpriced if he makes good on the power that he has and sticks as a near everyday player for Miami. So yeah, he makes some sense, I think, as a late dart with some ceiling. Denzel Clark goes down here. I mean, the defense obviously is going to drive some playing time opportunities for him, which is huge. Gives him a chance at a power speed combo that'd be really exciting this late. The thing that gives you pause, I would say, is more than the high K rate upon arrival in a small sample last year. It was nearly a 30% strikeout rate over 180 games at AA. So the swing and miss is going to take some time for Denzel Clark to whittle away at. But I think he's above the threshold that you need to be at for being so good with the glove that your shortcomings as a hitter may not matter all that much. If he's only okay, if he strikes out 33% of the time this year and gets on base at a 290 or 300 clip in the bottom third of the order, I think they'd be pretty happy with that given the defense in center field, and I think the counting stats would end up being okay for as late as he goes.
Yeah, it's a Scott-like case, and he costs less than Scott. There are two guys that seemingly are similar in Jorge Soler and Tyler O'Neill, and I like both. Especially if like me, you ended up 2 or 3 homers short of your 300 homer target, and you're looking for some power from a guy that could play his way into everyday playing time. The separator for me on Soler and O'Neill, who are both have injury history, both swing the bat really hard, both have great power, is team factors once again. The Angels need Soler more than the Orioles need Tyler O'Neill. And I know there's some contract issues where Soler's at the end of his contract. The Angels could move on from him pretty easily, where the Orioles have another year of Tyler O'Neill and may want to, find a role for him. But that role for Tyler O'Neill might be smaller than you want. And so for Soler, I'm just betting on the fact that when he's healthy, he's playing. And he's a right-hander, so he's playing most of the time. And so I think Soler's a pretty good pick down here. I know he's 33, and I'm not, depending on the projected bounce back. I'm just saying, even if he doesn't play that well, the Angels will need him.
Yeah, I like that call. Cheap power and plenty of chances that they're going to mess around with Trout's role, and I think DH is still a place where Soler can get a lot of his plate appearances anyway. So the good years from Soler are still probably pretty good. I'm thinking like 240, 250, good OBP, 25-plus homers with room for a lot more. But health is a big factor for him. He's had some pretty massive injuries that have cost him time over the years. Lane Thomas is still kind of interesting to me just because KC needs to find answers in the outfield. I don't love him in center field, but I think if he could end up playing nearly every day, Lane Thomas ends up being a little bit of a nice oatmeal roster filler for way past pick 300 in most leagues.
Yeah, the downside is that, Collins is a switch hitter in left field. And Jack Castellanos is a left-hander who may have some of the best upside of anybody that hasn't scratched that upside yet on the Royals. So, yes, they may platoon him with Castellanos. And then Isbell's a better defender. So I think there is some risk that Thomas ends up second place in a lot of the outfield situations and is kind of a true fourth outfielder. That's why he goes where he goes. But what could he do? He could scratch his way into the starting center field job pretty easily because Isbell's bat is pretty limp.
Yeah, with Isbell not hitting enough, that just changes the balance of what they need. It might just be, we'll take a slightly below average defensive center fielder or below average defensive center fielder for a guy that's league average overall, because that power speed combo for Lane Thomas when he's healthy is actually pretty useful. I see Austin Hayes maybe popping with a lot of playing time now that he landed with the White Sox.
It is a really good spot for him. I guess the small side platoon risk is somewhat real, but as a right-hander, he's played his way into regular playing time in the past, and we don't know what they'll do with Benintendi. But if Benintendi ends up DHing, that could be a spot for him, and that would leave Brooks Baldwin with some playing time. But Baldwin's really interesting because as a switch hitter, I've seen some projections with 20 homers and 15 steals, but I think his playing time, Brooks Baldwin's playing time, just took a real big hit. And so I think I would take Hayes over Baldwin at this point, but interesting also to think about the White Sox need to be thinking about the future and which one of these guys is more interesting in the future. It is Baldwin. So a lot hinges on what they decide to do with how competitive they want to be, what they want to do with Benintendi in the outfield. But I like Hayes a little bit. Speaking of roles in the outfield, Parker Meadows seems strong out there with good defensive numbers. Not a great arm, but 90th percentile sprint speed. Looks like around 75th percentile outs above average. And I think he's a good defender, and I think he's their best defender in center field right now. But you heard on our podcast with Keith Law that Max Clark is the next center fielder in Detroit. And if that's the case, then all the flaws that Meadows has, the bat speed, the power is just it hasn't come on. And he whiffs too much to have this level of power. So it's a huge season for Parker Meadows. The good news is he's 26 and he's done better at a lot of these things in the past. And so I think the case for Parker Meadows is post-type sleeper that needs to poop or get off the potty like right now.
I do think the way his season started, he was hurt and just never quite right in 2025. I can look at those numbers and say that's just probably the result of the injury. And again, that pulls you back to 2024 where you're saying, okay, maybe it's 15-15 with pretty good skills against righties and has to drop in the order against lefties. Like that's still probably like the best case scenario for Parker Meadows, but with defense that drives the playing time again. Kind of a theme for a lot of the tooled up outfielders to go this late.
The risk here is he's not tooled up. You know what I mean? I guess he runs well, but like his hard hit rates have never been good. He has 1 year of an okay barrel rate, and his max EVs are bad and his bat speed is bad. So, yes, he runs well and the glove is there, but this is the type of package that could go too old schooly where it's like that's a zero power, all glove, all legs type player. We don't really play those guys as starters in the league that much anymore.
Yeah.
So and it means that the glove and the legs have to be elite, which I'm not sure they are for him. So it's a big year for him. If you want to just pick a 26-year-old that needs to have a big year, I think the psychology of that could go either way, right? Like you could just have so much pressure on you and know this is your year. Max Clark is coming. Like it's soon you're going to run out of options. This is his last year with options, right? So you can get options. That after that it gets even worse and you might be in DFA hell. If you are Parker Meadows, this needs to be the year, and that can go either way. You could get all stressed out about it, or you could turn that into serious motivation to have your best year.
You might look at the situation and say, we're not going to see Max Clark until like late August, most likely. And that gives you a lot of season to put the pieces together. So I think I'm a little higher on Meadows than you are at this stage as far as late darts go. Jacob Melton, I think, deserves another mention here. I mean, the Rays outfield is crowded, but not in any way certain.
But not good.
They probably think it's good, and they're probably right, but I don't know who they're really going to play the most. I thought it was interesting. Eric Neander said that Melton has, quote, the potential to be a 20-homer, 40-steal player. Potential is a key word there, but Melton defensively gives them something in center field that could be well above average too. So if they don't like what they're getting from Cedric Mullins early in the season defensively, they can move Mullins back to a corner. They could use Melton in center. If they just like the way Melton's hitting, he could just make the team right out of camp. Like the ultimate, we don't know because everything's on the table. He could be a regular to start the season. He could be a big side platoon guy to start the season. He could be back at AAA because he has options left to start the season. All of those things almost seem equally likely right now.
I would say that I don't think he'll get a lot of plate appearances in the major leagues this year. And for a weird example, I have Junior Caminero. Now, Junior Caminero is nothing like him. He has all bat, questions of glove. The point I'm making is, if they love Jacob Melton, they can't have loved him as much as they love Junior Caminero. And Junior Caminero had 36 plate appearances in 2023, 177 in 2024, and then had his final chance. And in fact, I think normally the way you look at this team, they kind of slow walk. Jonathan Aranda has been around forever, and he had to get 87, 100, 143 before he got 422. Carson Williams was supposed to be their big prospect of the future. He's 22, so he's still young, but he only got 106 plate appearances last year in a year that they lost, and they it was a kind of a reload year. So I think Jacob Melton gets 150 plate appearances this year. That's my math.
Okay. I'll take the over. Don't know how it's going to happen.
My pick in this one, if we want a deep Ray, is Jake Fraley. Jake Fraley is boring. He's 30, and he's left-handed, so he's very likely to be platooned. But he's been a near league average bat with okay defense, okay everything, and they gave him actual money. So they're not going to DFA him, I don't think, not in Tampa. So if I'm going to take a real late outfielder in Tampa, it's Jake Fraley or it's Luke Raley. Former Ray, just because...
Wait, you're going to walk into that situation with Raley instead of Canzone? Like, because he's a better defender? It's like splitting the difference?
It's also a little bit cheaper, and Raley has first base eligibility. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it does. For those deep leagues, yep, that helps.
I did a Raley-Fraley connection somewhere in the 40s in one of my draft and holds.
The Raley-Fraley law seems like something that would come back to bite us 150 years later, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
We have another glove first guy that I think the team context has really helped in this offseason so far, with a couple of the trades that the Diamondbacks have made. I believe that Alek Thomas is in a similar situation, maybe to maybe a Parker Meadows or whatever, where he's done some stuff. It hasn't been necessarily starter level stuff, and there might be guys coming up that will take his job eventually, but this year, I don't think Blaze Alexander is a better center fielder than Alek Thomas. And even if I like Jordan Lawler and I think he takes the position, I don't know that he's going to usurp Alek Thomas at center field this year. I think you'd have to play some there and prove it first. I might be wrong there. I believe that's the place where I could be the most wrong, is that Lawler takes it from Alek Thomas. But I think Alek Thomas is, 25 years old, had some experience in the league, has been okay. He's been terrible to okay. And I don't know that there's like a thing that I can't, here's this one cool stat that means that Alek Thomas is going to be good this year. He doesn't really do the things I want him to do. He doesn't really hit the ball hard. He doesn't really barrel the ball. He doesn't have a great sense of the zone. I don't know. I just think he's got the time. And this is a formerly highly regarded prospect that doesn't have zero power, and could just put things together at age 25 and be a 15-15 guy with a 240, 250 average. Seems like a good value where he's going.
I think he might be a slightly younger version of Kyle Isbell, and I liked both of these guys as prospects, and neither of them have hit the way I expected. You look at the last 3 seasons, Isbell 80 WRC+, Alek Thomas 75. You look at the StatCast numbers, they're very similar. Max EV 110s for both. There's like a 0.3 mile per hour difference in the top end power. Thomas does have a 41.1% hard hit rate, Isbell 37.2. A little more in terms of barrel rate, I guess, with Thomas, and the fact he's a couple years younger. It is kind of like his last real opportunity before the Diamondbacks move on to some other approach. And there are some other rookies and some really interesting names in here. I guess my version of Alek Thomas is actually Garrett Mitchell. He's been hurt and hurt and hurt. When we've seen him, we've seen swing and miss, but we've seen the ability to draw walks. We've seen some power. We've seen speed. He's a good defender in center field. There's a world in which he's playing against all the righties and at least getting a big side platoon if he can stay healthy. And he's going really, really, really late. So still intrigued by Garrett Mitchell, but man, like multiple shoulder injuries on top of hand injuries, and it seems like every type of injury possible.
There's an acceptable K percentage for every level of power, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying everybody with a 30% strikeout rate I don't like. It's just that if he's going to have a 30% strikeout rate and a 7% barrel rate, then I'm not in. So there's just that acceptable level of power that I need. There are a couple of young guys. I'm going to take Ryan Waldschmidt over Walker Jenkins, and that's not a keeper league situation. I think I would do the reverse in a keeper league, because Walker Jenkins, is a 20-year-old that's on the cusp of the big leagues. I just think that the Twins might use this year to sort through their major league roster and not necessarily debut, this prospect. What we're hearing, from the fallout, and this is news related, the Derek Falvey, I don't even know what words to use. Was he fired, or they said that they left a mutual decision? Yeah, divorce.
It's a divorce. I don't know who filed, but it's a divorce.
You're right. And reading between the lines, they've been actually fairly upfront about what it was. Is that he used to work with one Polad, and then he got a new Polad, and the new Polad was like more about winning this year or something. But also wasn't going to put any resources on the table. So I think Falvey was like, what do you want?
How does that work, boss? Yeah. I can see where that would turn into some disagreements, especially if the previous person from the ownership group that you were working with was more on line with a longer term vision, and you were kind of steering everything that way. But to have someone come in, slam the brakes on your plan, and say, fix it, and you don't get to spend any more money, that would be very aggravating.
Yeah, I might just leave. But some of the fallout is that this new Polad, I don't even want to name their first names because I don't want to tell them apart. The new Polad has decided that he's going to have more input. So that could go either way. Business. I guess he could be like, "Ooh, I like the shiny new toy. Like, let's do that." Or I think it's a little bit more likely if you have a slightly more low information person. Don't you think that they're likely going to be like, "Oh, I've seen Trevor Larnach play. I'd rather he played all year." You know what I mean? Than going to like a untested prospect. I mean, what we see from guys like Angelos and who's the guy in Anaheim?
Artie Moreno.
What did he do? Oh, give me Albert Pujols. I've heard of him. You know what I mean? So I think that it's possible that Walker doesn't start. Waldschmidt is, was a college signing, I believe. Yes, college.
That's correct. He went to college. Yes.
He's
Kentucky,
23. He's 23, and this team he'll have options, obviously. So the team has a short-term need with Lourdes Gurriel out, and they could say, let's try Ryan Waldschmidt and Blaze Alexander in left, and tell Waldschmidt, hey, we just need you now, and maybe you go down when Lourdes Gurriel comes up, or you play yourself into a role.
Yeah, Waldschmidt's path is looking a little bit better than it did even 3 or 4 months ago. A lot of encouraging reports about how they might bring him along pretty quickly. So if you're looking for that opportunity of someone that could hit right away, that actually could be Ryan Waldschmidt. And it's a lineup that we like.
Blaze, by the way, I think is one of my favorite draft and hold late fix all of your positional needs type guy, because I think he's going to add outfield eligibility. He's right now the backup left fielder and center fielder and shortstop and second baseman and third baseman. That's a lot of positional goodness. I don't know if he'll turn it into full-time playing time, but sometimes in a draft and hold, you just need, oh, God, all my middle infielders are hurt, and I just need a guy to go in there, and Blaze could do that for you. He is out of options, and he's their utility guy. So, non-zero chance he's their starter in left field on opening day.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, before we go, we didn't do sleepers and busts on every single outfield preview because, there's almost 4 of them. And I was going to recap it. I was going to say from like the top end outfielders, the most undervalued player that I keep targeting is Jackson Merrill. That's been the case going back to the fall. I think Jackson Merrill is an early round guy that's not going right in the top 30 picks anymore because of all the injuries last year. So he's one of my undervalued options. Lawrence Butler, kind of in that next tier, pick 140, pick 150, seems undervalued to me as well. Evan Carter, I think, would be my next group down as far as like pick 250 or so. I think I like the speed. I think the average is going to be fine. There's non-zero power, and there's a clear path for him to be the everyday center fielder if he can finally put all the injuries behind him. Today's episode, finding like one sleeper is actually a little harder, or one clearly undervalued player, because no one in this group is actually expensive. But I think I'm pretty intrigued by the situation that we have for Jacob Melton in deeper leagues. So if we're saying like the last outfielder on your bench in a 15-team league right now, take that chance. If he doesn't make the opening day roster, cut him. You move on, right? I just think there's a world in which the power and the speed are there right away. I think he hits the ball hard enough and plays good enough defense where he could end up becoming a fixture sooner rather than later. I want to see if that happens. And I think the price to find that information out is so low that, if it's a round 30 pick, great. I move on if I'm wrong.
I love guys that are that the projections love. So Seiya Suzuki is just going too late for his projections. It's a real obvious high floor situation where the numbers are just like, why are we not taking him? So I like him for that reason. Lawrence Butler is somebody that I think is just heading into that kind of third season, putting it all together, and he does a lot of stuff we like under the hood. Plus, he has a great home park. So Lawrence Butler in that next tier. When it comes to the third outfield tier, I have a lot of Josh Lowe. I can't say that I think he's going to break out, but I do love taking guys where, I see them on a team that really needs them. We talked a lot about team context today, and I think that Josh Lowe is just, he's like Jorge Soler on that team. The Angels need them, so they're going to play if they're healthy. But I like Jordan Beck and Elliot Ramos a lot in terms of skills, right-handedness. I think that being right-handed gets really important when you're trying to fill your third outfielder, your fourth outfielder slot, because you don't want to get into the lefty platoon guys until you have to, And then that switches over when you get down to, your fifth outfielder spot. Then all of a sudden, I will take a Jesus Sanchez. I love Cam Smith and Jordan Walker, but he doesn't need to be a right-hander at this point. Owen Casey, come on down. Those are the types of sleepers I'll take for fifth and sixth outfielder because I'm hoping just to kind of smush them together and get enough playing time out of them and just avoid lefties wherever I can.
Okay. Speaking of avoids, how about one that goes somewhere in or around the top 100 overall that you're steering away from in the outfield because you think the price is just a little bit too high?
In terms of avoids, I guess a Pete Crow Armstrong. I'm just worried about what the batting average will look like. He seems like a very streaky guy with some flaws in the approach. Maybe it'll work out, but I think that's a little bit expensive for me where he's going.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. I think I've been talking myself out of Cody Bellinger. The more I've looked at his home road splits last year, I think the big deal they gave him keeps the playing time safe. The real downside playing time to me is if he gets hurt, right? I just worry that it's going to be a little more of a steep regression than we expect for Cody Bellinger. And it goes early enough into the top 75 where you don't have to take him there. If you don't like it, just pass, do something else. If he falls 20 or 30 spots, maybe I'd think about it because then I think he's kind of in that Luis Robert, Noel Villamarte range. But I think there's more volatility with Cody Bellinger than you'd think given the contract that the Yankees just gave him. All right, we made it through all the outfielders after all this. Pitcher week begins on Tuesday. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, be sure to hit the like button on this video or leave us a nice rating review wherever you listen to this podcast. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Pitcher ranks out tomorrow. Thanks for listening.